Even though we are in the middle of August, winter preparations are in full swing in the bee yard. One of the especially fun and yummy parts of winter preparation is getting to deal with the honey and figure out how much honey stays with the bees for their overwintering and how much gets to go to the humans. So with that, I just wanted to talk about honey and address some of the questions that beekeepers sometimes have and just people who are interested in bees and really love to consume honey. So let's learn about honey. So honey actually does have an official definition. More or less what honey is it's nectar that is extracted from nectar producing plants gathered by the bees and then dehydrated after mixing with their own secretions within their body to create this very pure and very specific product. So here we have what's called uncapped honey. And what this is in the process of it. So bees will go to nectar producing plants and they will extract the nectar. They will bring it back to their colony. They will exchange this nectar with other bees through this thing called trophallaxis, which is them exchanging between each other's stomachs via their tongue. And that mixes the nectar with enzymes within their body. And once that's done enough times, then they will insert it into these cells for dehydration. So the dehydration process is when they will beat their wings full speed, high amounts for a very long time. We're talking weeks, maybe even possibly months in some circumstances, and that will reduce the water content down to a certain percentage. That's when they decide to cap it because it is ready for long-term storage. The risk of fermentation is greatly reduced when it's below, I believe 19% is kind of the target. Some honey sources will have a little bit lower, some will be a little bit higher. And as beekeepers, it's important for us to test it to figure out what might be safe to extract with reduced risk of fermentation and what can go back to the bees for more dehydration. But with cappings, this is even kind of interesting in itself. So we have a very clear example of what's called wet cappings and what's called dry cappings. So this is all from bees. They produce these little wax flakes during certain times of year, and then they will cover the honey to keep it protected from getting extra moisture within it. But there's no significant difference in terms of what kind of wax this is. The difference, they say, is that the dry cappings have this appearance because there's a little bit of air underneath the pockets. And then the wet cappings, the wax is put directly on top of the nectar once it's dehydrated to the appropriate amount. The influence of, this versus this can be a variety of different things. I've read that it might be because of genetics. Some genetics of bees are just known to produce more of this dry capping, some more of the wet. This is all from one beehive, both of these. These were both right next to each other. So obviously there was some kind of pattern that was going on. And although there are different genetics within each colony, it's probably not a severe difference where like only certain kinds of bees did that and only other ones did that. It was probably more just based on the resources that are in the area and the time when they were being capped. That can be another influence. So maybe one was capped, like this was done earlier and ready to cap, and then this was all collected or capped later at just a different rate. And then we're seeing just this progression. You can kind of maybe start to tell a story a little bit. Like maybe this was collected first from a honey source, it was dehydrated, they kept it over, and then maybe this was collected later, or maybe had a higher water content and just took longer to dehydrate and then cap. And then here, something happened here where they couldn't cap any of it. So I did test it, and some parts are a lower moisture content and some are higher. So even that, we have a little bit of a progression with the story of they probably collected this stuff earlier and dehydrated it, and then are putting in more honey that is just fresher, higher water content, more recent, and it just takes longer to dehydrate it. So just kind of interesting stuff. This is super, super fascinating. And then me as a beekeeper, I get to determine What do I want to keep? What do I want to give back to the bees? General rules of thumb, we want at least 1 super of honey going back to the bees. And of what we keep, we want to have it capped over as much as possible, because that's going to ensure that the water content is lower. It's going to reduce the risk of fermentation after extraction. And yeah, it's kind of cool, huh?